School Janitor Walks Miles to work daily, but what the students did next shocked everyone. Every morning before sunrise, while most people are still asleep, a tired man with worn-out boots steps out of a small, quiet house. He doesn't carry a briefcase or a backpack, just a paper lunch bag in one hand and a jacket that's too thin for the cold. His name is Mr. Lewis, and every single day, without fail, he walks more than 4 miles. Not to chase a dream or reach a big office, but simply to clean a school. He doesn't complain. He never has. But what the students at that school discovered about him would change everything. The town was still dark when Mr. Lewis left his house that morning. The street lamps buzzed softly, lighting up empty sidewalks. A chilly breeze blew through the trees, but he just pulled his jacket tighter and kept walking. His steps were slow but steady, like he knew every crack in the pavement. Because he did. He'd walked this same path every day for months. Inside his little kitchen just an hour earlier, the smell of plain oatmeal filled the air. He made 2 bowls. One for himself and one for Max, his old golden retriever who was already waiting near the stove, tail thumping quietly. "Easy now, old friend," Mr. Lewis said, bending slowly to place Max's dish on the floor. His knees creaked and his hands shook slightly, but his voice was gentle, kind, the same way it always was. After breakfast, he stood in front of a mirror in the hallway. He combed what was left of his hair, adjusted the collar of his faded blue work shirt, and looked at the photo taped to the mirror's corner. A woman with kind eyes smiled back at him, her arms around a younger girl in a graduation gown. "Claire, would have been proud of you," he whispered. "Our Emily's doing great at college. You always said she would." The house was old, small, and worn down, but every corner was neat and cared for. Like someone had taken the time to make sure even the broken things still had a place. By 5:15 a.m., he had packed his lunch. 2 slices of ham between old bread, a slice of cheese, and an apple that was a little bruised. He wrapped it in wax paper and slipped it into a brown paper bag. Then he reached down to tie his boots that had holes on the side and soles glued back on more than once. As he stepped outside, Max barked once, like he always did. Mr. Lewis turned back with a soft smile. "Be good. I'll be back before sunset." And so, he began his walk. The first mile wasn't too bad. The air was crisp, and the sun was still hiding behind the hills. He passed familiar homes, nodded at the bakery where the smell of fresh bread drifted through the vent, and waved to Mrs. Henderson who was already watering her plants. By mile 2, his knee started hurting, like it always did. But he didn't stop. He never did. He passed the old gas station, the corner with the broken streetlight, and the bus stop. The same bus he couldn't afford rumbled past him, splashing a bit of water from a nearby puddle. He didn't flinch, just kept going. Each step told a story. Each worn-out crack in the sidewalk held memories. For most people, it was just a street. For him, it was a lifeline. At mile 3, he slowed a little. He leaned for a second on a short brick wall near the post office, not to rest, just to breathe. He checked his watch. Still on time. When the school finally came into view, a small smile crossed his face. Not because the walk was over, but because he was home in a way. He didn't just work at that school, he gave his heart to it. No one saw how tired he really was, or how much he ached. They just saw the man with the kind smile who always said, "Good morning," fixed things without being asked, and called every student by name. But something was about to change. Because while Mr. Lewis had spent all that time noticing others, remembering birthdays, fixing broken zippers, offering lunch money to kids who forgot theirs, someone had finally started noticing him, and what happened next would leave the entire town speechless. Mr. Lewis walked into the school like he always did, before most people had even had their coffee. The sun was barely up, casting a soft glow through the long school windows. He unlocked the main entrance, with a heavy set of keys that jingled softly at his side. The halls were quiet, still, waiting. As he stepped inside, the silence greeted him like an old friend. He moved slowly through the building, pushing his cart down the hallway, his steps echoing softly on the polished floors. It was his world, one he had quietly taken care of for years. Every corner held a memory. Every classroom had a story. Most students didn't know how much he did before the first bell even rang. While they were still waking up at home, Mr. Lewis had already cleaned the bathrooms, swept the hallways, dusted the trophy cases, and made sure the paper towels were full, in every room. He didn't do it for thanks. He never expected applause. But if you asked around, everyone had a Mr. Lewis story. Like the time Jessica, a shy freshman, slipped and dropped her lunch tray in front of everyone. Her eyes had filled with tears, not from pain, but from embarrassment. She'd whispered, "I'm sorry," as chocolate milk spread across the tile floor. But Mr. Lewis had been there in seconds. "You know," he said, kneeling beside her with a mop in hand. "Once, I dropped an entire bucket of paint right in the middle of the gym. Took me 4 hours to clean it up. You're doing just fine." Jessica smiled for the first time that week. Then, there was Tommy. His backpack had ripped halfway through the day, spilling books everywhere. Before he even got a chance to tell anyone, Mr. Lewis had sewn the strap back together during his lunch break, using heavy-duty thread he kept in a drawer, just in case. And Amy, who forgot her lunch money one day, had found a $5 bill, tucked under her milk carton with a sticky note that read, "Pay me back when you're famous." She never did. Mr. Lewis never mentioned it again. He didn't talk about his sore knees or how his car had been dead in the driveway for months. He didn't tell anyone that he walked miles in worn-out shoes, carrying a lunch bag and a heart, full of responsibilities. He just kept showing up. Every day. Rain or shine. Even when it snowed so hard last winter that the town had shut down for the day, he had walked all the way in, just to shovel the school's sidewalks so no one else would slip when they eventually reopened. Most people didn't even notice. But slowly, quietly, the students were beginning to. One by one. They saw how he limped a little more with each passing week. They noticed how he paused sometimes at the corner near the science wing, leaning ever so slightly against the wall, as if gathering strength. They saw how he saved half his sandwich some days and wrapped it up carefully, maybe for dinner. Later, it wasn't just what he did. It was the way he did it, with care, patience, and a quiet smile that never faded, even when his eyes looked tired. To the students, Mr. Lewis was more than a janitor. He was a constant, the one who never forgot your name, never judged your bad day, and always had time, even when he didn't. One afternoon, a few students sat together in the school's tiny journalism room, flipping through notes for their upcoming newsletter. The editor tapped her pencil on the desk, distracted. "Have you guys ever noticed Mr. Lewis limps a lot more now?" she asked quietly. There was a pause, then a few nods. One girl said she'd seen him walking along Route 7, miles from the school. "I thought it was weird," she said. "He was carrying a lunch bag, no car in sight." Another added, "He fixed my locker last week and winced the whole time. Didn't say a word about it. Just smiled." The room went quiet. Eyes met. Thoughts spun. That's when something started to shift. The students began to watch more closely. They saw him arrive before sunrise and stay long after the final bell. They noticed how he held doors open, picked up forgotten jackets, comforted kids having a hard day, all while hiding his own struggle. He had always noticed them. Now, they were starting to notice him. One of the students whispered, "I think we need to do something." And that thought, as small and soft as it was in that quiet room, would grow. Because sometimes the biggest changes don't start with noise or a big moment. Sometimes they start with someone quietly caring enough to pay attention. And for Mr. Lewis, the man who had walked miles each day without ever asking for help, someone was finally starting to walk in his shoes. At first, it was just a thought, a passing moment in a busy day, but once it was spoken aloud, it didn't go away. "He walks here," someone said again the next morning. Mr. Lewis. He walks, like actually walks, every day. That small sentence echoed around the school like a whisper through the walls. Not shouted, not announced, just quietly passed from student to student, room to room. Some didn't believe it at first. Others nodded silently, because they had seen it too. That tired walk up the front steps, the way he rubbed his knee when he thought no one was looking. The fact that his car had been sitting in the same spot behind the school for weeks, untouched. And the more they looked, the more they saw. In homeroom, a teacher asked a question, and no one answered. Not because they weren't listening, but because they were watching through the window, watching Mr. Lewis carry a crate of cleaning supplies, wincing slightly as he went down the stairs. In the cafeteria, a student noticed how he gave the last clean tray to a kid who was running late, then waited until everyone had finished eating, before he sat down in the corner with just a cup of tea and half a sandwich. In the library, someone whispered, "He's always early, always here, but never talks about himself." By the end of that week, a small group had gathered in the journalism room again. Different faces this time, but the same feeling, a quiet urgency. "He's not just a janitor," one of them said. "He's part of this school, part of us. He fixed my broken glasses once, didn't even ask. Just showed up with a tiny screwdriver and a cloth. He walked with me to the counselor's office when I was having a panic attack. Stayed outside the door the whole time, never told anyone." The stories began to pour out like a flood that had been held back too long. Some were simple, others cut deep. My little brother was being bullied in the hallway. Mr. Lewis stood in front of him and said, "No one gets left behind in this school." After that, the bullies never came back. I was crying outside the band room last year. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside me, said, "Sometimes you don't have to explain the storm, just wait it out." I never forgot that. And slowly, something began to grow, a feeling none of them had expected. Guilt. Because now that they were noticing, really noticing, they realized how long they hadn't, how long he had been walking those miles, how long he'd been hiding the pain, how long they had smiled back and said thank you, then walked away without really seeing him. Someone pulled out their phone. "Let's find out exactly how far he walks," they said. A quick search on a map app. Silence. Then a collective inhale. 4.2 miles, one way, 8.4 miles a day, every single day, through rain, through heat, through snow, with worn-out shoes and a worn-out knee. The room went still. Someone swore under their breath. Another whispered, "That's more than I walk in a week." No one laughed. One student spoke up, quiet, certain. "I want to follow him." They all turned toward her. "Not in a weird way," she said quickly. "I just want to see it, all of it, his whole walk. Maybe if I understand what he's really going through, we'll know how to help." That night, she told her parents she was staying late to work on an article. But at 5:45 p.m., she was already outside the school gates, hiding behind a tree with her backpack slung over her shoulder. And then, like clockwork, Mr. Lewis stepped outside. Same jacket, same paper lunch bag, same steady limp. She followed from a distance, careful not to be seen. She watched as he passed the bakery, nodded at the same empty bus stop, paused at the same wall to stretch his leg. Every few blocks he slowed down. Every few minutes he checked his watch. Not out of worry, but out of routine. Like time was something he learned to respect. It wasn't just a walk. It was a daily act of quiet strength, of silent survival. She followed him all the way to the edge of town, past flickering street lamps and cracked sidewalks, until he turned into a narrow driveway beside a small house with chipped paint and drooping gutters. She stopped there, watching him fumble for his keys and open the door. No porch light, no car. No welcome home. Just Max, the golden retriever, waiting faithfully at the door. And then she cried. Not loudly. Not for attention. Just a soft, stunned kind of cry. The kind that comes when you realize someone's been carrying a weight you never bothered to see. That night, she didn't sleep. She wrote a post, a message, a truth. Every day, a quiet man walks 8 miles just to help us, to clean our school, to support our future, and we didn't notice, but now we do, and we're going to do something about it. She didn't know yet what that something was, but the first step had been taken, someone had finally noticed, and everything was about to change. The next morning, the atmosphere at school was different. Nothing had been announced. No posters had gone up. No announcements were made over the speakers, but something invisible had shifted. Whispers moved down the halls like a current. Eyes watched a little more closely. Footsteps slowed whenever Mr. Lewis walked by. The student who followed him the night before sat at her desk, drained but wide awake. Her notebook was full, but more than notes, it held purpose now. She didn't need to convince anyone. When she shared what she'd seen, how far he walked, how many times he had to stop, the condition of his shoes, people just listened. And then they shared their own stories, again. It was like lighting a match in a dark room. One by one, more students joined in. No one asked them to. They just felt it. Like it was finally time to repay the man who had asked for nothing but had, quietly given everything. The journalism room became their unofficial headquarters. They pushed the desks into a circle. Some kids sat on the floor, others leaned against the walls. Everyone had something to say. We need to fix his car. One said, It's not fixable. His neighbor told me the repair costs are more than the car is even worth. What about the bus? He doesn't take it. It's too expensive and doesn't even stop near his house. Someone sighed. So he just walks every single day? The room was quiet. Yes, said the girl who followed him. And I watched him do it. Every step. I don't think I've ever seen anyone more tired or more determined. From there, the plan started to take shape, not from one person, but from all of them. It started with a list. What Mr. Lewis needed, what he deserved, what they could possibly give. At the top, a reliable car. Not just something to get him through a few more months, but something safe, dependable, worthy of the man who never let the school down. How do we raise that kind of money? Someone asked. Social media, another answered. This story, it needs to be told, not just here, everywhere. They created an Instagram page, a TikTok account, a hashtag, Miles for Mr. Lewis. They didn't make it flashy, just honest. Each post told a story, a memory, a small act of kindness that had stuck with them. One girl posted a video saying, I forgot my lunch money twice in a row last year. He didn't say anything, just handed me $5 with a smile and said, It's on me today. I found out later he skips lunch sometimes. Probably gave me his own money. A teacher submitted a story. When I started my first year, here, nervous and unsure, Mr. Lewis was the first person who made me feel welcome. He didn't just hand me my classroom keys. He showed me where the good coffee was, told me which kids would need a little extra kindness, and left a sticky note on my desk that said, You're going to be great. I still have it. The stories poured in. An older student now in college sent a message from across the country. He fixed my bike chain in 9th grade when no one else would stop to help. That's who he is, always watching, always helping. Local parents began sharing. 2. And soon, something even more unexpected happened. Former students, people who had graduated 10, 15 years ago, started messaging the account. I remember Mr. Lewis like it was yesterday. He was always there, always smiling. I broke down crying outside the principal's office once. He sat beside me and said, "It's okay to fall apart. Just don't forget to get back up again." I've never forgotten that. They shared. They donated. They spread the word, and something rare began to form. Momentum. A simple GoFundMe link was added with a caption. He walks 8.4 miles a day. He's helped hundreds of students. Let's help him walk a little less. By the end of the first day, the fundraiser had reached $1,200. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And it told the students one thing. People were listening. Back at school, the students began observing Mr. Lewis more closely, not just because of the fundraiser, but because they genuinely wanted to see him, to understand him. They watched as he carried heavy cleaning buckets down the hall, pausing halfway to stretch his leg. They noticed how he always gave the younger kids an encouraging word, or helped teachers carry supplies to their rooms, even when he had his own things to do. He never seemed rushed, never annoyed, just present. And yet, still, he never mentioned the walk, not once. It wasn't until one afternoon, when a student casually said, "Hey, Mr. Lewis, need a ride home?" that something shifted. He paused, just for a second, and then smiled. "Thanks, kid, but I got 2 good feet and a good dog waiting for me." Then he winked and continued down the hall. He had no idea what was coming. No idea that behind the scenes, a storm of love, gratitude, and generosity was building for him. He had no idea that while he had spent years walking alone, now an entire school was walking with him. The students had no idea what would happen when they launched the fundraiser. They hoped. They believed. But deep down, they weren't sure if anyone beyond their school would care. But people did care. That Friday morning, when the GoFundMe crossed $2,000, someone cheered in the hallway. Not because of the number, but because it meant people were seeing him. Mr. Lewis. By the end of the weekend, that number had doubled. Students who barely spoke in class were now walking around with clipboards and ideas. Kids who usually spent lunch glued to their phones were filming short videos instead, telling stories about the man who once offered to walk a sick student to the nurse in the pouring rain, even though he didn't have an umbrella. Teachers joined in without hesitation. One of them offered extra credit for anyone who volunteered time toward the fundraiser. Another printed posters at home on her own printer. A third, Mr. Thompson, the art teacher, designed a giant banner with a hand-painted quote, "Kindness is a seed." Mr. Lewis planted hundreds. It was true. For years, Mr. Lewis had quietly done the things no one else noticed. Until now. The school's student council repurposed their next event, a talent show, into a benefit night. Tickets sold out. Parents came. Alumni showed up with spouses and babies. One former student even flew in from another state, just to be part of it. That night, between musical acts and poetry readings, a slideshow played on the auditorium screen. It was simple, just photos of Mr. Lewis over the years, cleaning a window with a silly hat on Spirit Week, helping a kindergartner tie her shoe, laughing with a group of seniors on their last day of school. By the end of the video, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The applause shook the walls, then came the interviews. A local news reporter caught wind of the campaign from a parent's Facebook post and came to the school the next day. She showed up with a camera crew, but no script, just curiosity. She asked one question, "Why are you doing this?" The answer came from a student sitting cross-legged on the floor of the journalism room. Because he's walked enough. Because kindness like his deserves to be honored. Because someone like Mr. Lewis should never feel invisible. The segment aired that same night, and suddenly, it wasn't just their town talking. Donations started rolling in from strangers in other cities. People who had never met Mr. Lewis but had known someone like him. Someone quiet, gentle, constant. The kind of person who holds a whole community together without anyone realizing it. Someone wrote, "My school janitor used to stay after hours to help me with art projects. He passed away last year, donating in his memory. Tell Mr. Lewis he matters." Another said, "I never got to thank the man who walked me to the bus stop when I was afraid, so I'll thank yours." By the end of the week, the fundraiser had passed $12,000. That same day, the school principal called an emergency assembly. Most students thought they were in trouble. Instead, she stood on the auditorium stage, smiled, and said, "We've decided to match up to $5,000 of the fundraiser." The crowd erupted. Mr. Lewis still had no idea. He came to work each day, as always, early, steady, quietly tired. He pushed his cart through the halls, fixed loose doorknobs, changed light bulbs, mopped the cafeteria floors after lunch. But now, students stopped him. They offered to help carry things. They thanked him, really thanked him. They brought him coffee, shared their lunch, even slipped kind notes into his locker. Some kids who used to walk right past him without a glance now gave him hugs or high fives on their way to class. He smiled through all of it, never asking why. Just grateful, maybe, for the sudden wave of kindness. Then one morning, he found a sticky note taped to his janitor cart. "We see you, Mr. Lewis. You've walked so far. Let us carry you for a while." He didn't say anything, just touched the note with his fingers, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his shirt pocket. That same day, the students took things even further. They launched the Miles for Mr. Lewis Challenge, a campaign encouraging people to walk a symbolic 4.2 miles and share it online with the hashtag. It caught on faster than they imagined. People posted videos of themselves walking for him, along beaches, through neighborhoods, across gym floors. Some walked alone, others in groups. A third-grade class in another state walked laps around their school field, holding signs that read, "For Mr. Lewis." The comments kept coming, the donations kept coming, the love kept coming, and still Mr. Lewis came to school every day. Same calm voice, same kind eyes, same worn-out boots. But something had changed. In the eyes of everyone around him, he wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a hero, a quiet one. The kind the world needs more of, and even though he didn't know it yet, his long walk was almost over, because the entire community had decided, together, that Mr. Lewis had carried enough. Now it was their turn. The day started like any other, at my 4:30 a.m. Mr. Lewis's alarm clock buzzed to life, its tinny ring echoing in the quiet of his small home. He sat up slowly, like he always did. His knees protested the cold morning air. Max, his old golden retriever, lifted his head and wagged his tail, like always. Nothing seemed different. Not the oatmeal, not the coffee, not the careful folding of his lunch into a brown paper bag. He tied his boots, checked his watch, gave Max a soft pat on the head and whispered, "Be good, buddy. I'll be back soon." He didn't know the world outside was already awake for him. Across town, the school parking lot looked nothing like it usually did. Students and parents had been there since dawn. Teachers brought breakfast. Volunteers hung blue and silver streamers across the school gates. Balloons bounced gently in the wind. At the center of it all, hidden behind a tall curtain, stood a silver SUV with a giant red bow across the windshield. Not too flashy, just clean, sturdy, and brand new. It had everything Mr. Lewis would need: easy controls, heated seats for his joints, and plenty of room in the back for Max. The students had planned every detail. The band hid behind a row of parked cars, waiting for the right moment. The local news crew stood ready, quietly prepping equipment. One student stood by with a walkie-talkie whispering updates. He just turned the corner. He's walking up the hill now. Everyone grew silent. The buzz of quiet chatter faded to stillness as the familiar figure appeared at the edge of the parking lot. Worn boots, a paper bag in one hand, jacket zipped up halfway. Same slow, steady walk. He didn't notice the decorations at first. He was too focused on his steps. But halfway across the lot, he looked up and stopped. The colors, the banners, the crowd, dozens of people. Maybe more. Students he knew, teachers from long ago, parents, siblings, neighbors, all standing in silence, all waiting for him. He blinked, confused. Then looked down at his shirt like maybe something was on it. Then up again. "What is this?" he said softly. One student stepped forward, holding a microphone, hands shaking slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Lewis." He nodded slowly, still unsure. "We know you weren't expecting this, but we've been watching." Not in a weird way. She added quickly, and a few people smiled. Just really watching. For the first time, maybe. She looked around at the crowd, then back at him. "We noticed how you greet every student by name, how you stay late for plays you're not in, and games you're not watching, how you never say no to someone who needs help." A breeze moved through the lot. A balloon broke loose and floated up into the sky. "We noticed your limp, the way you lean on walls when you think no one sees, the way your car's been in the same spot for months, the way you walk here and walk home, every single day." Mr. Lewis lowered his head. A soft sound escaped his throat, somewhere between a breath and a sigh. "We didn't know, but now we do. And we wanted to say thank you." She turned to the curtain, gave a small nod. Two students pulled the rope. The curtain fell away. The crowd gasped, not because of the car, but because of what it meant. A symbol of how far love can reach, how deeply gratitude can grow. Mr. Lewis didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the silver SUV, his jaw slightly open. A few people started clapping, then more, then everyone. Someone rang a bell. The band played the school's theme softly behind. The applause. Still, he didn't move. Finally, he stepped forward. One step, two. Then he turned around, eyes red, voice trembling. "I don't know what to say." He paused. The silence waited patiently for him. I didn't think anyone noticed. I was just doing my job." He looked at the students, then the teachers, then the car again. "I walk because I have to. I never minded. I like to think. I like the quiet. And I guess part of me thought maybe I'd earned the pain too. No one moved, but this?" He motioned to the car. "This is more than I ever expected in my whole life." He wiped his face. His hand trembled. "My wife, Claire. She used to tell me that kindness always circles back. She said one day, 'It would come when you needed it most,' but I thought it had already come when I got this job. When I got to see your faces every morning. That was enough for me." He took another step toward the car. Someone handed him the keys. He stared at them like they were made of gold. "This means I can get home before dark, that I can drive my daughter to her internship next summer, that I can take Max to the vet without worrying about bus routes." He turned toward the crowd. "This means I don't have to walk alone anymore." The cheering started again. The applause, the hugs. Students rushed forward. Some cried. Some just held on to him. Max, who someone had brought to join the moment, barked from the sidelines and wagged his tail like he knew exactly what was happening. Mr. Lewis opened the car door, sat in the driver's seat, ran his hand along the steering wheel like it was a dream. He looked out the window at the crowd. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "So I'll just keep doing what I've always done. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep helping. Because you reminded me that what we give, quietly, without asking, comes back louder than we ever imagined." He started the engine. The sound was smooth and steady, just like him. The students laughed and clapped again, and as he drove slowly around the lot, waving through the open window, a single line was written on the back windshield in marker. He walked for us. Now we ride with him. The Monday after the surprise, Mr. Lewis's new SUV sat parked in the staff lot, shining in the morning light. The red bow was gone now, tucked away in the trunk. He said he didn't have the heart to throw it out. But something else lingered in the air. Not just excitement, not just pride. Something deeper. A shift. Students who once hurried past each other now stopped to hold doors. Kids who barely spoke were working together on kindness projects, some with no reward, just the quiet satisfaction of doing good. One of them taped a handwritten note to a hallway mirror that read, "If no one's told you today, Mr. Lewis believes in you, and so do we." The staff felt it too. Teachers stayed a few minutes longer after school, helping students catch up. The front office workers started a helping hands board where students could post needs anonymously. Extra pencils, shoes, a winter jacket. Items disappeared from the list almost as quickly as they were added, because now, people were noticing. And the funny thing was, Mr. Lewis didn't change, not really. He still arrived early, still smiled at everyone, still helped when lockers jammed or when the sound system fizzled during assemblies. The only difference was now he got there with warm knees, dry clothes, and enough time to walk Max before work. But the way people saw him, that changed forever. In the weeks that followed, stories about Mr. Lewis reached places no one expected. The fundraiser was mentioned in national news. A podcast did a segment on hidden heroes in our schools and dedicated it to him. Letters came in from people across the country. But the most powerful impact wasn't online. It was local. It was real. Every year after, the school created something called the Mr. Lewis Challenge. Students were encouraged to notice the unnoticed, to help quietly, without expecting applause, to walk with someone who usually walked alone. The school even added a plaque near the front doors, just beneath the trophy case. It read, "In honor of Mr. Lewis, who walked miles without ever asking for help, and taught us all how far kindness can go." The space beneath it was left empty, intentionally, for students to leave notes, drawings, flowers, or stories. Over time, it became one of the most visited spots in the entire school. Some students left little things. "Thanks for fixing. My backpack when no one else noticed it broke. You told me I mattered when I was ready to give up. You were right. I walk my little brother to school now, just like you walked for all of us." Years passed. Max eventually passed away, his last days spent riding happily in the passenger seat of the SUV, head out the window. Mr. Lewis buried him in the backyard under a tree they used to sit under, with a hand-carved stone that simply said, "Good boy, good heart." His daughter graduated college, got a job, started her own life. And every time she called him, she reminded him of the walk he no longer had to take, and the people who made it possible. Eventually, Mr. Lewis retired. There was no big send-off. That's not what he wanted. Just a quiet lunch in the staff lounge, a few gifts, a lot of hugs. The last thing he did before he left the building that final day was clean the windows near the front entrance. "It's what Claire would have done," he told a teacher. "She always said, leave something better than you found it." But the story didn't end there. It never does, not with people like him. 10 years later, a new teacher arrived at the school. Young, nervous, unsure. On her first day, she walked into her classroom and found a note on her desk. It read, "You're going to do great, Mr. Lewis." Below it, someone had drawn a tiny pair of boots. She didn't know who Mr. Lewis was yet, but she would. Everyone did eventually. That teacher? She went on to start a program for mentoring first-year students. When asked why, she said, "Because someone I never met believed in me. That's all it took. the ripple never stopped. Across the town, a local auto shop created a small scholarship called the Janitor's Journey. Every year, they donated car repair services to someone in need. A single mom, an elderly neighbor, a young man trying to get to night school. One of the mechanics said it started with a story about a man who walked too far and smiled anyway. In the school, students began starting their own kindness projects. They raised money for other quiet workers. The lunch lady whose husband was sick, the crossing guard who stood in the rain, the coach who bought shoes for players out of his own pocket. Not because someone told them to, because now they saw them. One winter morning, as snow dusted the town, the new principal gathered students around the flagpole. A group of second graders stood holding candles in little jars. Today was the day they renamed the school walkway. The path Mr. Lewis had walked day after day, they placed a new sign. The Lewis Way, where kindness walks first. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a reminder that the most important people in our lives aren't always loud. They aren't always leaders. Sometimes they're the ones holding the door, sweeping the hall, offering a warm word when the day feels too long. Mr. Lewis didn't leave behind trophies or fame. He left something stronger, a blueprint for how to live quietly, give generously and care deeply, and long after the SUV was gone. Long after the paint on the banners faded, long after his name stopped trending online, his story continued. In every hallway where a student noticed someone sitting alone, in every classroom where a kid asked, "Need help with that?" In every heart that whispered, "If he could do it, maybe I can too." That's the real legacy, not the car, not the fundraiser, but the footsteps of kindness, echoing long after the man himself had gone home. And every now and then, if you walked by the school late enough in the day, you might still hear them. A faint, steady rhythm, like someone walking, not alone, but surrounded by every life he ever touched.